the ABCs. The A stands for awareness of your DHS. So you have to now figure out, okay, what is it that caused this symptom to begin with? It isn't the water, it isn't, that chocolate milk or the milk, it isn't the way I'm sleeping. Like, there had to have been something I was dealing with at that time that was unexpected and stressful, and then my symptoms showed up after that. What could that have been? And then you just pinpoint it in your relationships, with your family, with your work. Look at the most important things in your life at the time that the symptoms showed up. Okay, so if you're dealing with like chronic symptoms for 10 years or ever since you were 12, you have to remember, I have to look at the thing from the eyes of a 12-year-old, not an adult looking back. You see what I mean? Because to you now, you might think, yeah, but there was no problem when I was 12. But when you were 12, something subtle, like your best friend moving to a different school, could have been what started it, okay? So you have to be aware of it, because the awareness is huge. It relaxes the psyche when you understand what it was that started it, okay? Next, you've got to break away from your tracks of triggers. So you've got to start to identify, okay, now that I know what the original issue, what are the things that are triggering it? Which is really like the allergy. What is it that, now that I know what it is, it flares up every time I'm at work. It flares up every night before bed. It flares up on the weekends, every Sunday. Why? There's something in those moments that's a trigger, and you've got to consciously break away from that initially. Okay? The other thing you've got to break away from is the old pattern of thinking. Meaning, before you learn any of this, if it's a cough, you're thinking it's some dust in the air. If it's digestion, you're thinking it's something you're eating, right? I need you to break away from that thinking and relate it to, it can't be the food, it has to be this issue that was going on at that time. And the food happened to be around, and I linked it to the food, either subconsciously or consciously, right? Because you read that that could be caused by eating this. Oh my gosh, I eat lots of that. Maybe that's what it is. And then you link it. And then if you make that food dangerous now, your body will react to it. Okay, so again, I want you to get that this is not mind over matter kind of thing. Like it's, just control your mind and you control your, no. This is real physiological change at the tissues initiated by an unexpected event that was emotionally distressing for you. So you have to figure out what that event is, break the association that that event, that it was something else that caused the symptom, and then the final thing is, how do you change your perspective about the symptoms and about that conflict? You have to be able to now see that the symptom is a sign that my body's telling me that there's something around here that's reminding me of the original issue. So you pay attention to the symptoms now. The next thing is you have to change your perspective about the situation. If it is that ex-husband, if it is that move when you're a kid, if it is that co-worker at work that's getting on your case, how do you look at that situation differently? This is the part that's not so easy, right? Like figuring this out with help, you're going to get to. The challenge is, if the conflict is related to your spouse or your mother-in-law that now moves in and is living with you, how do you change the perspective, your perspective of that situation so that it doesn't trigger you? Do you see what I mean? Because you can do all the treatment you want. When you go home, you get reminded of the trigger if you didn't change the way you look at that. And this is why I'm always very congratulatory of the patients when they're able to resolve it, because that means they went through this entire process on their own. Like I just had to help them or guide them, but then they did the work. It wasn't anything I was doing, right? And that's why, realistically, I tell people now, this is really, GNM is like a fusion of natural healing and personal growth. Because for you to overcome your symptom, especially if it's chronic, it means you outgrow an old perspective. You outgrow it. When I was 20, I used to believe this about people that smoked or people that were critical or people that were mean. Now that I'm 40, I don't look at it like that anymore. I have a more mature perspective. Then you're able to resolve the issue tied to that now. Okay? But again, having said that, I get calls all the time. It's not so, there's a lot of people stuck here. Okay? And a lot of that has to do with they're not able to break away from the old pattern. See, they try to fit GNM into the old paradigm thinking that like you have to avoid the disease, you have to get rid of the symptom because it's a bad thing. That's hard, because what we're learning here is that the symptom is a guide. You can't get rid of a symptom. How do you get rid of an unexpected event in your life? between the time I finish and you get home, like I could have a heart attack here, and hopefully that's a shock for some of you, and then you might get symptoms from that. But you see what I mean? There's no way you can prevent it. And so that alone is a new way of thinking when it comes to health. Because we're sort of taught that you can prevent a lot of stuff. If you do the right thing, you can... now I want you to realize that no, it's about how do I stay mentally flexible? And again, that doesn't disregard the therapies, because when you have the symptoms, like I said, you're going to work on the psyche part of it, but it's real pain, it's real digestive issue, it's real symptoms, it's a real skin rash. So which means like places like this that have a whole ton of stuff that you can apply, that you can use to downgrade, minimize the symptoms is going to be beneficial. But it goes hand in hand with you working on, I know what this is really about, it's taking me time to work through it, but I know what it's about. In the meantime, I need to take this, see this therapist, do this so that I can get relief from the symptom. Okay? But again, you see how it's a shift in how you're going to think about that. Because if this is true, what Dr. Hammer's research is showing, there's no way you're going to be able to prevent an unexpected event. Which means you can do everything quote-unquote right in terms of living a lifestyle that is the healthiest. You don't know when your son is going to come home and become depressed and suicidal because his girlfriend broke his heart. How can you prepare for that? You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So instead, my thing is what you work on is the emotional flexibility. How do you get to a place where it's easy for you to change your mind about anything and to change your expectation? Period. Right? Because we're sort of trained that we have to be consistent in life. If I say this is the way it is, it has to be this way. But now what we're learning is the more rigid you are in how you think, technically the more difficult it is for your body to deal with things that don't go the way you expect. So the more flexible you are, the quicker you can change your mind or change the way you're looking at something. Technically the healthier you are, because you can downgrade and recognize these right away. And that's what's great, is that when you live with this, like I've lived with it for the last 9 years, with 2 kids, I'm not worried so much about all the external stuff that the kids are consuming. I'm worried about their emotional state.